Good evening. I'm your host, and this is Kenya News Update today. In a powerful display of unity and remembrance, thousands gathered on Chicago's South Side this Friday to pay their final public tribute to Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., the pioneering civil rights leader who passed away last month at the age of 86. The service, dubbed a celebration of hope, drew a constellation of American political royalty, with three former presidents and a former vice president delivering heartfelt eulogies. But the event also highlighted a stark political divide, as the current occupant of the White House, President Donald Trump, was notably absent. Tonight, we take a deep dive into the legacy of Reverend Jackson, the significance of this memorial, and what his life's work means for America and the world in 2026. We'll examine the numbers behind his influence, the political calculus of his memorial, and the enduring questions about the state of racial justice and coalition politics today. Let's begin with the scene at the church. The crowd was estimated in the thousands, a testament to Jackson's deep roots in Chicago and his national stature. Inside, the atmosphere was described as both somber and celebratory, a fitting tone for a man who dedicated his life to the struggle for equality. The service lasted for over 4 hours, featuring tributes from religious leaders, civil rights activists, and political figures. Former President Barack Obama, a fellow Southsider, received a thunderous ovation as he entered. He was joined by former Presidents Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, and former Vice President Kamala Harris. Their collective presence represented a unified front from the Democratic Party, honoring a man who helped shape its modern identity on issues of race and economic justice. But let's put this in perspective. The absence of President Trump, a Republican, speaks volumes about the current political polarization. While it's not unprecedented for sitting presidents to skip funerals of major figures from the opposing party, the contrast was sharp. Here was a man, Reverend Jackson, who ran for president himself in 1984 and 1988, fundamentally altering the American political landscape. His Rainbow Coalition sought to build a multiracial alliance of the dispossessed. Yet in 2026, that vision feels both urgently needed and profoundly fractured. We must ask, is the broad coalition Jackson envisioned possible in today's political climate, or have the divisions become too deep? To understand his impact, we need to look at the numbers. Reverend Jackson's 1984 presidential campaign was historic. He competed in primaries and caucuses across the country, ultimately winning approximately 3.2 million votes. That was about 12% of the total Democratic primary vote. More importantly, he registered millions of new voters, particularly in Black communities. His 1988 campaign built on that success, winning 11 primaries and caucuses and securing nearly 7 million votes. That was a staggering 29% of the total Democratic primary vote. Let's visualize that growth. These campaigns were not just about votes, they were about influence. Jackson's presence on the debate stage forced other candidates to address issues like apartheid in South Africa, affirmative action, and economic disinvestment in urban areas. He pushed the Democratic Party platform to the left on numerous issues. Former President Obama directly credited Jackson today, stating that his runs set the stage for other Black leaders, implicitly acknowledging the path they paved for his own historic election in 2008. The data shows a direct lineage. Jackson's voter registration drives in the 1980s helped create the electoral map that Obama would later conquer. Beyond politics, Jackson's influence extended into corporate boardrooms and onto picket lines. Through his organization, Operation Push, later the Rainbow Push Coalition, he pioneered the use of economic boycotts and negotiations to force corporate America to diversify. He negotiated what he called covenants with major companies like Coca-Cola, Burger King, and Anheuser-Busch. These agreements had measurable targets. For instance, a typical covenant might include a commitment to increase Black franchise ownership by 15% over 5 years, to allocate 25% of advertising budgets to Black-owned media, and to have Black professionals constitute at least 12% of mid-level management within 3 years. Let's look at the structure of a typical Jackson economic covenant. The results were significant. According to studies from the late 1990s, companies that entered into these covenants saw, on average, a 300% increase in procurement from minority-owned businesses over a decade. They also increased Black representation on their corporate boards by an average of 8 percentage points. Jackson's strategy was simple: use public pressure and economic leverage to create tangible, measurable change. He didn't just march, he negotiated contracts. This blend of protest and pragmatism became his trademark. Now, let's analyze the political symbolism of today's memorial. The gathering of three former Democratic presidents, Clinton, Obama, and Biden, alongside Harris, is a powerful image. It represents the consolidation of Jackson's legacy within one party. Each of these leaders had a complex relationship with Jackson. President Clinton, in his remarks, praised Jackson as a conscience for the nation, but their relationship was tested during Clinton's presidency over policies like welfare reform. President Obama's connection is more personal and geographic, both hailing from Chicago's South Side. President Biden often references his long friendship with Jackson, dating back to Biden's early Senate days. Their unified presence today is a deliberate act of political memory, claiming Jackson squarely for the Democratic tradition. But this raises a critical debate. Has Jackson's vision been fully realized, or has it been co-opted? Some critics on the left argue that the Democratic Party has embraced the symbolism of Jackson's struggle while retreating from the economic radicalism of his platform. Jackson advocated for a massive federal jobs program, a wealth tax, and a non-interventionist foreign policy, positions that remain on the fringes of the party's mainstream. The speakers today celebrated the man, but will they champion his most ambitious policy ideas? This is the central tension in honoring any radical figure, the struggle between sanitizing their memory and confronting the unfinished business of their work. The international dimension of Jackson's work cannot be overlooked. He was a truly global figure. He traveled to Syria in 1984 to secure the release of a captured U.S. Navy pilot, Lieutenant Robert Goodman. He was a fierce and early opponent of apartheid, leading protests at the South African Embassy in Washington. He mediated conflicts in Africa and the Middle East, often operating where official U.S. diplomacy feared to tread. In many ways, he acted as a shadow Secretary of State for human rights. His global activism was based on a principle of solidarity, linking the struggle of Black Americans with liberation movements worldwide. This stands in stark contrast to the more nationalist, America First foreign policy of the current Trump administration, highlighting another axis of contemporary political conflict. So, where does this leave us in March 2026? Reverend Jackson's passing comes at a moment of profound reflection on race and democracy in America. The political landscape he helped shape is now dominated by figures he influenced, yet the country feels more divided than ever. The turnout today, thousands in Chicago and millions watching online, proves his enduring resonance. But the work, as all the speakers noted, is far from complete. Key metrics on racial equity show a mixed picture. While Black political representation has increased dramatically since the 1980s, economic disparities remain entrenched. Let's examine some current data on racial economic gaps. The median wealth of white households remains nearly 8 times that of Black households. The unemployment rate for Black Americans is consistently about twice the rate for white Americans. And in terms of political influence, while there are over 50 Black members of Congress today, policy outcomes for Black communities on issues like criminal justice reform, voting rights, and student debt relief have been incremental and fiercely contested. Jackson's life reminds us that progress is not linear and requires constant pressure from both inside and outside the system. Furthermore, the coalition building that was Jackson's hallmark faces new challenges. The Rainbow Coalition aimed to unite Black, Latino, Asian, Native American, and progressive white voters around a common economic agenda. Today, political strategists debate whether a focus on universal, class-based policies or targeted, race-conscious policies is more effective. Data from recent elections shows a complex picture. The Democratic Party's coalition has become more racially diverse, but also shows signs of strain, with some working-class voters of all races drifting to the Republican Party under President Trump. Building a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition for economic justice is arguably more necessary than ever, but also more complicated. In his later years, Reverend Jackson faced health challenges and saw some of his political influence wane. But his organization, Rainbow Push, continues its work. It still holds its weekly Saturday morning forum in Chicago, a platform for activists and politicians. It still negotiates corporate covenants, though with less fanfare than in the 1990s, and the Jackson family itself remains a political dynasty. His son, Jonathan Jackson, is a U.S. congressman from Illinois. The legacy is institutionalized, but the fiery, prophetic voice that could command a network news spotlight and a corporate CEO's attention at the same time is now silent. As we conclude this deep dive, let's reflect on the key takeaways from today's historic tribute. First, Jesse Jackson Sr. was a transformative figure who expanded the realm of the possible in American politics. His presidential campaigns, though unsuccessful, changed the Democratic Party and the nation's conversation about race and power. Second, his methodology, combining street protest with boardroom negotiation, created a blueprint for achieving measurable economic justice that is still studied and employed today. Third, his memorial service highlighted the deep political fissures in contemporary America, with one party claiming his legacy while the other remains absent. And finally, his life's work poses an unanswered question for 2026. Can a new rainbow coalition be built to address the intersecting crises of economic inequality, racial injustice, and democratic erosion? The thousands who gathered today, and the millions reflecting on his life, are a testament to the power of a single individual to bend the arc of history. But as Reverend Jackson himself would often say, keep hope alive. The hope he spoke of wasn't passive, it was a call to action, a demand for engagement, a belief in the power of organized people to change their destiny. His physical presence is gone, but the movements he helped build and the ideas he championed continue. The ultimate tribute will not be in the words spoken at his funeral, but in the work that continues in his name. From Chicago to Nairobi, from the halls of Congress to the streets where people still march for justice, the struggle and the hope endure. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today.